I wanted to answer some of the questions that you guys had so you can learn a little bit more about me. My name is Wesley. I'm 29 years old. I'm Chinese, Filipino, American. I was born in the US in Los Angeles, California, where I spent most of my life until I was 25. When I was 25, I moved to Colombia. I was there for 3.5 years. I went to Asia for 6 months. After Asia, I came here to Poland. My parents are immigrants from the Philippines, but we are full Chinese blood. So the oldest Chinatown in the world is actually in Manila, Philippines. A couple generations ago, my family left because of the war and they migrated over to the Philippines, so they started over. I was a professional pianist for 7 years. I also taught piano. I did real estate for a couple of years. I also had my own band at one point. When I was in Colombia, I taught English, I owned a restaurant, and I also produced and composed my own music, and a lot of that music has been used on TV shows and movies. So now I just focus on YouTube and consulting full-time. How many languages do I speak? Number one is English, because I was born in America. English is my native language. Number two, at home we speak a dialect of Chinese called Hokkien. It's from the Fujian province, but there's different variations. There's a Hokkien spoken in Malaysia, there's a Hokkien spoken in Singapore. But my family speaks Hokkien from the Philippines. I understand pretty much 90% of everything, but I barely speak it because my sister and I, we would always respond in English to our parents. Number three, 我会讲一点点普通话，因为我小的时候我学过8年中文，但是现在我不可以讲很好。My accent is really bad. I've forgotten a lot of it because I just haven't used it. If you were to throw me in China or Taiwan, give me a month and I can get back to a B1 level. And number four, puedo hablar español porque cuando estaba en Colombia vivía mi vida prácticamente solo en español. Mi ex esposa no podía hablar inglés tampoco, entonces es por eso yo hablo bien español y tenía muchas ganas para aprender por mí mismo. So what's my relationship status? I was previously married to a Colombian that I met while I was there, but we ended up getting a divorce. Talk about it in a separate video, so you guys can watch that if you're interested. I was seeing a Polish girl here for a while, but she ended up going back to her hometown. Now I'm single, so my goal is to find a long-term relationship, settle down, have kids. From my experience, I think I'll settle down with a Viet girl, a girl who's half Asian, half European, or a Slavic girl, particularly the Polish girls I like a lot. I think they are the best when it comes to just cultural match, but I'm in no real rush. So why am I in Poland? It's kind of a long story. When I was in Colombia, I posted in a Reddit forum called Asian Masculinity, where I was talking about my life in Colombia, and there was a guy, my friend Ezra, who was living at Poland at the time, and he was just raving about Poland and how Asians were treated very well here. It was very favorable for Americans. When everything didn't work out in Colombia, I decided, you know what? I would like to live in Europe for a bit, so why not try Poland? I came here initially for 6 months and I ended up loving it a lot. How is Poland? Well, it's kind of a broad question, but in general, I like it a lot. I think the winter is a little rough, but now that I have friends here and I'm a lot more comfortable here and I know what to expect, in general, my life here is great, especially during the summer. It has everything that I'm looking for in a country. Relatively cheap cost of living, great people, it's safe, great for Americans. Asians are highly respected here, so it's also a great place to find a partner. It's a developing country, so there's gonna be a lot of opportunity in the future. I'm reaching that age where I don't really wanna move around anymore. I've traveled all through my 20s, I've lived in so many places around the world, and I'm just looking for a place to settle down now, and Poland seems to be a very good option. How many countries have I been to, and which ones are your favorite? I've been to 40 countries. It's hard to pick a favorite because I like every country for different reasons. For example, Peru is a very cool spiritual experience and the food is great, but it's not necessarily a place that I would live. Colombia, I had a lot of amazing memories there and I grew a lot as a person, but I experienced so many negative experiences that it's hard for me to say it was my favorite. I actually really loved Vietnam. I felt quite at home there. I looked Viet. I love the food. I love how cheap it is. I think Viet women are super beautiful, and just the overall style of life just reminded me of how I like living life. I also really like Ukraine. So behind me, I'm at the monument called the Golden Gate. I really love the architecture as well, not just from like the national monuments, the buildings, the government buildings, everything all mixed together feels like a truly cosmopolitan but also very culturally rich European city. It was amazing watching how that country has come together during the war and all this hardship that they're going through right now. I liked Switzerland a lot because Geneva is one of the most beautiful cities that I've ever been to. I also like Poland a lot for so many reasons. This country has become like a new home for me. Just culturally, and what I stand for aligns a lot with Polish values? It's kind of hard to answer that question. I can't just pick one country that's my favorite. What do I like about Polish culture? It reminds me of my Chinese culture in a lot of ways. The way that they handle themselves in public, where everybody is respectful, minding their own business, not making a lot of noise in public spaces. I love how they value hard work and intelligence. I like their family values a lot. I think it's a little more intense than Chinese values, but I think the way that we view our respect towards our parents and our grandparents is very similar. I like how protective Poland is of their culture and their language and their people. They'll complain a lot amongst themselves, but as soon as anybody on the outside tries to attack Poland, they're the first ones to defend their country. I like how the men here are still men, and the women, even though they are, I guess, traditionally feminist, they're a good balance of Western and Eastern values where they are very competent and independent and strong, but I still think they appreciate what the man brings to the table. I like Poland's views on abiding by the rules and their overall viewpoint of societal order and structure. I value that a lot. And Poland also gets a bad rep for being racist, but I don't think that's true. They're not really racist. They're more of like, if you come and you accept our values, we will treat you as an equal. But if you come trying to bring your values, then get the F out. They are more patriotic and proud of their culture rather than trying to put other cultures down. Because if you look at their history, they have constantly had to move to other countries and were seen as like the second-class citizens because historically they understand that experience of being an immigrant in another culture. They aren't inherently racist to immigrants who come to this culture, even though there are a lot of people who are racist here. Why not go to China or Taiwan where you can blend well? A lot of children of immigrants can face this. I am too Asian for the Americans and too American for the Asians. When I go back to the Philippines, or I plan on going to Taiwan and China in the future, but we don't really dress the same, we don't really act the same, we grew up in two completely different cultures. And my Mandarin isn't that good and we don't even really speak the same languages. Chinese people, there's so many of us all over the world, even though our Chinese values are very strong, I still have the Western influence. And that's why I like living in Poland, because it's a mix of Eastern and Western values, which is exactly what I am. I have plans to see a lot more of Asia, but growing up in America, I never really fit into either category. Have you learned the language now that you're here in Poland? I have a couple videos in the works and I'm working with a sponsor right now. I know like 10 Polish words. Dzięki or dziękuję, which means thank you. Dzień dobry, which means like, good day. Uwaga, which means warning. Przepraszam, which means excuse me. Cześć, do widzenia, which means like see you later. Nie, tak, biblioteca, because it means the same in Spanish. Carte, which means card. And I also know a lot of the food words, right? Like butter or beef or chickens. There's some words that are quite similar to English that I've been able to make out. And you can also read some of the signs, because if you pay attention, there are some words that kind of read the same to English, so by context you can kind of make out what's going on. But I'm very hesitant to learn Polish because I learned Spanish from zero, right? And going from 0 to B1, I know how much work that takes, and it's a very big commitment if I don't know if I'm gonna stay in Poland long term. If I want to use my time to dedicate to learning a language, do I want to learn Polish, which is very niche and only works in Poland? Should I improve my Mandarin, which is actually quite useful? Or should I learn Russian, which is very useful? That's the conflict that I'm at right now. If I decide to stay here long term and I have a Polish partner, then yes, I will put a lot more effort into it. But because I don't really need it and I can survive without it, for the moment, I'm not going to spend a lot of time learning Polish. So how has living in Poland changed your political views? So this is a very interesting question, because when I was in Los Angeles, I was seen as super conservative. But now that I'm here in Poland, I'm way more centrist and maybe a little bit more liberal in a lot of ways. I'm neither pro or against LGBT. I don't really care what your sexual orientation is, but I understand Poland's hesitancy for letting that LGBT movement in, because in many Western countries, it's morphed into not even being about sexuality anymore, but just promoting other degenerate behavior. When it comes to abortion, one of my ex-girlfriends had one previously, and I went through that whole experience. I can't stand up here and say that I'm against abortion. When I was in Colombia, there was a lot of people in the church that have had abortions in the past who are now against it, and I always found that very hypocritical. I'm pro legal marijuana. Alcohol and cigarettes are way more destructive. I'm very open to psychedelic drugs. I've done mushrooms, LSD, I've done ayahuasca, and I really appreciate Poland's hard stance of not letting illegal immigrants into their country. This is a problem that we're having in a lot of Western Europe, in Canada, and in the US, and people like to blend together illegal immigration with legal immigration. Poland is very clear that we will accept immigrants who come here for a work visa or who have a purpose, but we will not accept illegal immigrants. And that should be the gold standard for every country. I also feel that Poland is quite lax on sex. It's more of like whatever you do is your business. The women here are not promiscuous. They are very sexually open in the context of a relationship. So it's a nice balance because I don't think they're quite as reserved as like the Middle Eastern countries, but they're not totally out there or complete hoes like they are in Western countries. Why not Spain? You speak Spanish and it's culturally different than Latin America. So this is something that I'm really torn about because my two options are staying here in Poland or going to Spain. Spain is easier for me because I'm Filipino. I can get a Spanish passport in 2 years, and that's the quickest route for me to get a European passport, which is one of my ultimate goals, so I'm heavily considering it. However, culturally, I much prefer Polish culture and I feel like I resonated with it a lot more. I think Spain is really, really woke right now and super feminist. The men are quite feminine and the people in general are, I don't know if lazy is the right word, but they just don't work as hard as people from the East. Just a lot more laid back, and I think Spanish people are also quite closed off. They stay amongst themselves, they stay with other Spanish people. I don't feel like they're as welcoming as Polish people, to be honest, especially the Asians. But the ideal situation for me is to be here in Poland, find a Polish partner, take her with me to Spain, and once I get my passport, decide if we want to stay in Spain or come back to Poland, but ideally I would like to come back to Poland because I would want to raise my kids here. Do you see yourself settling down in Poland, starting a family? So the short answer is yes, but it's a lot more complicated than that. I'm tired of looking and I'm quite happy with these two choices. If I end up with a Polish person, then most likely I'm gonna stay here. But if I, for some reason, end up with a Spanish person or a Latin person, which I think is highly unlikely, then obviously Spain would be a better option. Overall life philosophy is to always be flexible, be adaptable, because Poland is on the rise right now, but who knows? Maybe World War III happens and Poland, like much of history, is always caught in the middle of it. If things go south in Poland for whatever reason, I want to have the resources and the means to be able to go and move to another country just in case. I do think that Poland is a great place to raise a family though. Everything that I would want when it comes to raising kids, Poland has it. I think the women here are beautiful, they're great, it's a good cultural fit. I like how it's safe, how my kids can go out and play until 8 or 9 p.m. and they can walk home and I don't feel scared or that it's dangerous or anything. So at this point, I do have plans on staying in Poland long term, but I don't have to make the decision until a year from now. Why did you choose Poland for long term instead of Hungary, which you really liked? Budapest is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but it's great for a tourist destination and not necessarily a place I would like to live. I was also very fond of the girl that I met while I was there, and I saw a lot of long-term potential maybe dating her. The visa situation is a lot more favorable for Americans here in Poland. Hungary has a lot of issues with the politics and their government right now, and it just doesn't seem as stable, whereas Poland is growing quite rapidly and there seems to be a lot of opportunity here. If you could go back, what would you have done differently in your previous marriage? Whew, this is a very tough question. I think I made a lot of mistakes in that marriage. First off, I put a lot of pressure on that relationship to work because it was important for me to get my papers, and I think because of that, it pushed the relationship along a lot faster than I should have. I think marrying a woman significantly older was a mistake. It was so common in the church that I went to, and they all assured me that the marriage would be fine, and I believed them. I wish I knew myself better, but this is a tricky question because you can only really know what you want when you're in a place of stability. I wasn't there legally for a long time. I was building my restaurant, which was also a bad idea looking back in hindsight. Like, I should not have done that. Restaurant was in her name. The lease to my apartment was also in her name. I was just dependent on her in a lot of ways. So in the future, I want to be a lot more independent. I want to have my finances in order, my visa situation in order, everything in order before I bring her in, so I don't have to be dependent on my partner for any of that. And I also will highly prioritize sexual attraction. I didn't realize how important that was to me until I got married. I've never cheated on a partner before in my life, but I've never wanted to cheat more than when I was married. Also, it's difficult sometimes for a person to know if he's truly attracted to a person or the circumstances surrounding that person. The feeling that I got being in the church and them love bombing me and taking care of me was a feeling that I never really experienced in my life before, so I kind of latched on to that. Because of that, I kind of bought into the mindset of the church and everything. You know, that's how churches and cults usually work, so I didn't really know what I was getting into, and they were promising me that the marriage would look a certain way and we should do things a certain way. Once we were actually married, it was a completely different story than what I was promised. I wish we had sex before we got married. I wish we traveled before we got married, because it's hard to know how somebody will react in stressful situations until they are put in stressful situations. I'm honestly even questioning the whole concept of marriage. We're trying to make it work in the modern age. The institution of marriage is flawed. So I would rather be in a committed long-term partnership with somebody without having to get the government involved. People act based on incentives. If you're married, there's this kind of pretext that it's very difficult for them to leave, and I think that opens the door to abuse. Whereas if you're just in a relationship with somebody and you know that they could leave at any time, I think it makes people act better because it's that fear of losing that person that increases desire but also pushes you to be a better partner. I also wish I had a better relationship with my parents because at the time I wasn't talking to them. But now that we have a good relationship, I want to actively seek their counsel because their opinion is very important. They know me, they know our culture, and I think their opinion heavily matters in who I decide to be with next. And I also will pick somebody who's more culturally compatible with me. That's why I'm a fan of Slavic girls. That's why I would probably date another Asian girl or an Asian girl who's half European, half Asian. Marriage is already hard without all the cultural differences, and cultural differences just adds another layer of complexity and issues that could be avoided if you dated somebody with a compatible culture. So what's the future of the channel? I like doing the reaction videos. They get a lot of views, but there's not a lot of money into it, but I'll continue to do them because it's a lot of fun. I have plans on doing a lot more vlogs. I want to see more Polish cities, go to Spain, do a lot of vlogging there. I would ideally, maybe in winter of this year, I want to go back to Asia. And hopefully by that time, I have a partner so I can take her with me. And I want to do a lot of vlogging of Asia, of China, of Taiwan, of Japan, of Korea for the Polish audience. I highly recommend that you guys watch this video next. What do you guys think? Leave some more questions down below and I'll do another Q&A in the future. Peace.